2025 started a bit slow, but did it ever pick up in the second half? But that didn't stop me from playing a bunch of old stuff, obviously. Here are the games I finished in 2025. I'd somehow missed the fact that Sonic Galactic even existed until I started seeing it cross my feed in early January, and one of the Twitch streamers I followed played it live. I just caught the end of the stream, and after that decided I needed to try it myself. Sonic Galactic has a very nice look. It reminds me a lot of Sonic Mania. Star Team describes the demo as a fan-made interpretation of what a 2D Sonic could have looked like on 32-bit hardware. The demo is robust but short. You can play through every level in an hour or so. There are a good selection of environments here, all seemingly playing off traditional Sonic settings. I'm particularly fond of the Coral Garden Zone, mainly because the designers of Galactic found a way to make a zippy underwater level in a Sonic game. Not something that's been done very successfully by Sega as far as I can remember. Galactic plays wonderfully, features beautiful graphics that run at a silky smooth 60 frames per second, and even has some new gameplay mechanics. Sonic's new drop dash is a handy way to get instant momentum up hills, and can even be used on vertical surfaces to instigate a wall jump. The new skill fits right in with Sonic's traditional abilities, and opens up each level just a little bit more. The whole thing culminates in a big arena boss fight with loads of old-school video game characters cheering you on. It's a nice love letter to retro games to close out what is a super enjoyable demo. I sure hope Sega decides to give Star Team a shot at building a new, official Sonic game in this style. The thing I love about producing so much retro gaming content is that I frequently have an excuse to fire up old consoles from the 90s and play some of my all-time favorite games. The thing I hate about producing so much retro content is that I love those games so much I often find myself playing so many of them to completion when all I need is a couple minutes of footage at most. Such is the case with Sega Rally. While I was working on my Saturn Memories video earlier in 2025, I fired up my favorite console racer and couldn't put it down until I played through it with all three cars. Granted, that's only about 30 to 40 minutes of gameplay, but whatever. Not that I ever really stopped playing my Saturn, but I'm struck how the best games on the system really do hold up even 30 years later. Sega created one masterpiece after another on its 32-bit wonder, especially their arcade ports, and in my opinion, Sega Rally stands at the top of the heap. I'm always looking for a reason to turn on the Saturn and get dirty. Speaking of publishers who were putting out one banger after another, 2D fighters were at their zenith in the late 90s, and Capcom was just killing it. The Street Fighter Alpha series breathed some much-needed life into the franchise, while everyone was still waiting for Street Fighter 3 to be a thing. I always loved the Street Fighter Alpha games. Character redesigns and the almost cartoon-quality animation were a breath of fresh air after an endless parade of Street Fighter 2 updates. Even as a fan of the previous game, I was definitely ready for a change. And as much as I loved Street Fighter Alpha 2 was just that much better. In fact, I'd go as far as to say this is my favorite Street Fighter of all time. Plus, this is, by far, the best Chun-Li outfit of the series. I'm a big fan of the Quiet Place movies, but until I had a friend who happened to be doing PR for this game, I didn't even know it existed. Sure, I'll take a download code. It took me a while to check out The Road Ahead, as I was busy finishing up some other games late in 2024, but when I finally did check it out, I was hooked almost immediately. I'm not a survival horror aficionado by any stretch of the imagination, and I tend to bounce off them pretty fast if they don't capture my interest almost immediately. A Quiet Place, The Road Ahead just fit my playstyle perfectly, creeping through each stage overly cautiously, checking every nook and cranny. The tension in this game is thick right from the word go, and most encounters left my heart pounding. And all that creeping around made the moments where you just had no other choice but to make a break for it at the expense of staying quiet that much more exciting. Developer Stormind Games captured the essence of the Quiet Place world so perfectly in The Road Ahead. Interesting characters, a compelling story, and tragic circumstances kept me hooked right through to the end.
of scrubbing floors. Finding these jewel shards was no easy task, but now...
At long last, I have returned. Nodoki, for freeing me, I offer you power.
Yes, Master. Thank
In
you.
exchange for thy soul.
Of course, Master.
I'm pretty much over the whole memifying of garbage Nintendo games on the Philips CDI console. It's been done to death. So when I heard of the existence of Arzette, which was being created as an homage to the likes of Link, the Faces of Evil, and Zelda, the Wand of Gamelon, I really wasn't interested, and thus didn't even bother looking at this game for almost a year. But it kept coming up in conversation. When I went to the Long Island Retro Gaming Expo in particular, I heard over and over again how good the game was. And since it's a relatively cheap purchase, I decided to take a chance during a bit of a gaming lull at the beginning of the year. And I'm so glad I did. While it's true that Arzette would definitely look right at home on a CDI circa 1993, it actually plays like a dream. This is a nice, light Metroidvania that never gets unfairly challenging or confusing. Anytime I played it, I came away with a smile on my face. Let's talk about the presentation a bit. Even though I just said a couple minutes ago that I'm totally over the humor of the terrible cutscenes and voice acting in the CDI Zelda games, Arzette manages to make all of that somehow charming. The purposefully bad cutscenes, voiced mostly by amateur actors, capture the proper spirit, and so too do the levels. The Zelda CDI games existed in this weird time where photorealistic graphics were attainable, but in those games they were often mixed with wildly different art styles when it came to character graphics and animations. A lack of shadows on most of the sprites further added to the visual confusion, where you couldn't always tell what was a platform and what was meant to be in the background. Arzette replicates this style almost perfectly, with deliberately mismatched elements and a general lack of any depth outside of a fuzzy parallax layer in the background most of the time. And it works so well. Somehow it doesn't lead to many frustrating platform moments at all. Just a seriously fun game. I'm so glad I decided to take a chance on it. I've been working my way through the Lunar series of games on my Twitch channel for a while now, and this year managed to finish Lunar Eternal Blue on the Sega CD. While I did play this back in the day, the ridiculous difficulty later on and the stupid magic point cost per save resulted in just giving up, eventually playing through the remake on the PlayStation. But it was long past time I got through the entire Sega CD game. My original plan was to use the unworked design patch, but I still got through using a few strategies that helped to overcome the crazy difficulty curve. Anyway, in spite of that, I was happy to finally mark this one off the backlog, if only to experience the original game and compare it to my memory of the PlayStation remake. I have to say I still prefer the Silver Star over Eternal Blue, but I really do like how the two stories are connected. There's definitely a nice payoff for getting to the end of this sequel. South of Midnight was probably the first time I'd turned on my Xbox for any significant amount of time in over a year, but I'm sure glad I did. I'm a sucker for a game with a compelling story and unique setting, and South of Midnight has that in spades. It's all about Deep South mythology, featuring one extremely interesting and sometimes disturbing creature after another. And the story is fantastic. What begins as a daughter's attempt to save her mother after their home gets swept away by a flash flood ends up an emotional journey through her family's twisted past. Hazel is such an empathetic character that I couldn't help but care for her by the end of the game. From a gameplay perspective, South of Midnight lives squarely in AA territory, and that's okay. The combat is fun, if not extremely deep, and there are a few technical issues here and there, but the world and its inhabitants are so beautifully realized that I still couldn't put the controller down until I rolled credits. South of Midnight ended up 5th on my top 5 games of 2025 list for the Player One podcast. Silent Hill 2 is a classic, but the series has definitely been a blind spot for me. So when the remake was released in 2024, I saw it as a chance to finally understand what all the hype is about, especially because I was able to borrow a physical copy from a friend of mine. And now I get it. As you work through the game, it feels like you're just slipping deeper and deeper into absolute madness. It's a masterpiece. Very few games before or since have been so atmospheric and unsettling. As for the remake, I'm told the combat this time around is a lot easier than the original PlayStation 2 game, which I totally appreciate. On the downside, the game appears to have been padded for length, which results in some later areas really dragging after a while. It doesn't destroy the experience or anything, but it did dampen my enthusiasm at the time. If only this had been available back when I was working on my Ridge Racer history video. Arcade Archives is just an incredible collection of important coin-op classics, and I was so happy to see Namco's seminal Ridge Racer make the cut. It's about time we got an arcade-perfect port of this important game at home, especially since we got Daytona USA years ago. Ridge Racer holds up incredibly well and is very playable with a controller, thankfully.
Somebody's right on your tail! Woo! That was a great counter! You must be one genius of a driver. You gotta teach me! Hey! Somebody...
I almost don't have the words to describe just how excited I was for Mario Kart World. Mario Kart 8 was a masterpiece, one I'd been playing pretty regularly for the last decade, so expectations were high for this shiny new Switch 2 game. And while I did play through Mario Kart World, it had more to do with excitement over a new game console than love for the game itself. I think the open world concept really hamstrung Mario Kart World from the start, where we spend precious little time in the interesting courses and most of our time driving from point to point over boring landscapes. Don't get me wrong, this isn't a bad game. Parts of it really shine. There's a lot of great music in here, for example. But for the most part, Mario Kart World feels like a huge missed opportunity. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was on the verge of turning the franchise into a racing version of Smash Bros., with creative interpretations of beloved Nintendo properties in a celebration of the publisher's long, wonderful history. Mario Kart World feels like a step back, in the service of ticking a box that says Open World. I haven't picked it up since I rolled credits. Each year, sooner or later, the Picross bug bites me and I have to download a new game. In 2025, that game was Picross Juufuutei Raden's Guide for Pixel Museum. Now, I have to say I kind of wanted to hate this due to the whole starring a virtual YouTuber thing. That is totally not something I would normally be into. But I wanted a Picross game, and I was intrigued by the idea of the puzzles being based on works of art. So I was able to see past the virtual YouTuber element and just enjoy the game for what it is, a collection of really great Picross puzzles. A new Genesis shooter from Yuzo Koshiro and Ancient? Yes, please. There was no way I wasn't buying this, but I wasn't prepared for just how impressive it is. Built for actual Genesis hardware, it's amazing what Earthion does with the console. The visuals are just on another level, and the soundtrack is great too, though I don't know if I'd put it up there with Koshiro's all-time bests like Streets of Rage 2 or ActRaiser. One of my favorite shooters is Radiant Silvergun, and a big reason for that is the fact that you can slowly build up your ship's power over multiple play sessions. Earthion employs a similar mechanic and links it to an interesting risk-reward power-up system that I really dig. I can't wait to buy the cartridge version of this and play it on my Mega SG. I'm going to be referencing a lot of my old favorites as this video carries on. Ninja Gaiden on the NES is definitely on that list. When I talk about an action game with razor-sharp control, I'm talking about Ninja Gaiden. So few games ever felt so quick and precise. And of course, its incredible story scenes were groundbreaking back in 1989. Ragebound does a decent job of capturing the feel of the old 8-bit games, while really being its own thing. Once Kenji meets Kumori and the two combined forces, the game really opens up in interesting ways, constantly shifting focus from action to puzzles. I really like the way Ninja Gaiden looks. It feels closer to a sprite-based game we might have seen on the Saturn or PlayStation. Just pixely enough to feel retro, but still filled with wonderful special effects and screen-filling bosses. I also love how the story runs parallel to the original NES game, and the music makes multiple references to that incredible soundtrack. Ninja Gaiden Ragebound came very close to making my 2025 top 5 game list on the Player One podcast. I can't remember why I played through Contra in 2025. I must have been sifting around my library and noticed the Contra collection during a bit of downtime between the Ninja Gaiden and Shinobi releases. Contra on the NES was a staple for me when I was a kid. A friend and I would just input the Konami code and sit there until we'd taken down the Red Falcon organization. And while this started out as a way to revisit my childhood for 20 minutes or so, after I rolled credits on the NES game, I jumped into the Famicom version, as I remembered that the Japanese game used an MMC chip that was not included in the US cartridge. It was really neat to revisit a game I remember so well and experience things like full cinema scenes and noticeably more environmental animations in most of the game's levels. Who knew 2025 would be the return of the 90s ninjas? I was super excited about Art of Vengeance from the moment I saw a trailer, especially when I learned it was being developed by Lizard Cube. And boy, I wasn't disappointed. Visually, Shinobi is gorgeous. It has that same cell-style animation we've gotten used to with previous Lizard Cube productions like Wonder Boy and Streets of Rage 4. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. The whole thing is a big love letter to the first 4 games in the series. There are nods in here to Shinobi, Revenge of Shinobi, and my personal fave, Shadow Dancer, and especially Shinobi 3. In fact, this feels like pretty much an evolution of that last game. But Art of Vengeance doesn't feel old at all. While the action does definitely stir nostalgia for classic action platformers from the early 90s, you soon unlock enough different abilities to make the game feel much more modern. Not to mention the Metroid-inspired exploration element and jumping challenges that would feel right at home in games like Super Meat Boy or Celeste. In fact, I loved this game so much, I didn't even mind those challenges, even though I normally don't want anything to do with that sort of game. Shinobi Art of Vengeance ended up second in my top 5 games list of 2025 for the Player One podcast. Along with the Lunar games, I've also been slowly working my way through Sega's Shining series on Twitch, and in 2025, managed to finish the rather lengthy Shining Force CD. This is a 16-bit remake of the first 2 Game Gear games in the series, along with some Sega CD exclusive bonus content. I'm still mostly partial to the first Shining Force, but this is a great installment in the series that I never got around to finishing back in the day. The Red Book audio is simply fantastic, and the visuals are on par with what was in Shining Force 2 previously. And now it's on to the 3rd Game Gear game. RPGs used to be my genre of choice, especially Japanese RPGs, more especially Final Fantasy games. And while that series is still going strong, it kinda left me behind right around Final Fantasy XI. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 feels like what I imagine a modern Final Fantasy would be if Hironobu Sakaguchi was still running the franchise. And I can't even really explain it, because outside of the turn-based combat, which relies heavily on real-time gimmicks, it's hard to find any real parallels to the Super Nintendo and PlayStation era Final Fantasy games at all. It's just a vibe, I guess. Expedition 33 had me enthralled from the opening moments. It sets up such an intriguing story where a distant paintress paints a new number on a monolith and anyone older than that simply disappears. The story has some major twists along the way, most of which I simply didn't expect at all. And while I've heard some people say they feel the final act is a bit weak and the 2 different endings themselves disappointing, I totally loved it from beginning to end. And the presentation, wow. One of the best looking and sounding games I've ever experienced. The visual style is gorgeous. The soundtrack is an all-time classic. I'm all in on whatever Sandfall Interactive does next. Clair Obscur also made it to my top 5 games list for the year. I feel like if you weren't there to experience it firsthand, it's hard to understand just how big the first few Mortal Kombat games were. But Digital Eclipse comes pretty damn close to conveying it in the Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection. What is there to say other than this is another exceptional video game documentary by the team, with endless footage, both from back in the day and more modern interviews, and a deep collection of the original games to check out. It so successfully conveys the fascinating development of the original game and stories from a wide range of team members, not just Ed Boon and John Tobias. I did have a few minor complaints with this one though. First of all, there were a fair amount of modern YouTubers and influencers who were just kind of there to say, "Remember Mortal Kombat? That was awesome." I don't really get it. The games were a bit rough at launch too, with more than a few bugs, a broken difficulty system, and some niggling online issues. But to be fair, Digital Eclipse ironed out most of those issues very quickly, making Legacy Collection a must-own for anyone remotely interested or nostalgic for the heyday of the one-on-one fighting genre. As someone who still mourns the loss of Telltale Games, yet hasn't found many episodic titles that really appeal to him since, Dispatch was more than I ever could have hoped for. I'm a sucker for superhero stories that are grounded in the mundane reality of everyday life, and Dispatch captures that perfectly. Every character is unique and mostly likable from the minute you meet them, and their relationship arcs play out in wonderful, interesting ways throughout the 8-episode run. Though some might not find the core dispatching mechanic all that interesting, I find it to be very well balanced, forcing you to make quick decisions and accept that you won't necessarily be able to fix every problem during your shift. But the dialogue and animation is where Dispatch really shines. Every single character delivers a fantastic performance here, and the animated scenes, especially the action scenes, would look right at home in a feature film or high-budget streaming series. Dispatch wound up on my top 5 games list of 2025. I am totally on board for whatever Ad Hoc Studio does next. The the Picross bug truly bit me again this year as I moved directly from Juufuutei Raden's guide for Pixel Museum into Picross S5. Probably because it was on sale. Nothing profound to say about this other than Picross rocks, and when I get in a Picross mood, there's just no stopping me. Atari 50 just keeps getting better and better, which is almost hard to believe considering how great it was already. Pac-Man and Beyond uses the fact that Atari's original failed attempt to open in Japan in the 70s led to an eventual buyout by Namco as a jumping-off point to talk about some of the most important games ever released by one of the most important publishers in the history of the games industry. Pac-Man on the Atari 2600 sucked, yes, but I still played the hell out of it. Being able to experience it again, along with other early home ports of Namco games like Dig Dug and Galaga, stirred so much nostalgia in my old soul. As I've stated in previous discussions about Atari 50, the true importance of these Digital Eclipse documentaries is the interview footage with the developers who were actually there back in the 70s. Folks like Nolan Bushnell and Todd Fry are getting on in years. It's so wonderful that their stories have been immortalized in Atari 50. Remember when movie licenses were a staple of the video game industry? Action platformers, loosely based on whatever recent blockbuster hit theaters. Yeah, they were pretty mediocre more often than not, but every now and then you'd get a really solid game. And I have to say, I kind of miss it. Terminator 2D No Fate feels like a bit of a love letter to the 16-bit movie game genre, and just so happens to be really great. Bitmap Bureau managed to capture just about every iconic scene from the movie, as well as a few preceding scenes that do a great job of telling Sarah Connor's story leading up to the film. I also love how there are a couple of decision points in the game that can drastically change the story. And I gotta say that I totally did not expect to hear George Thorogood or Dwight Yoakam, but I'm here for it. The Picross addiction was strong in 2025, but man, is that mappy loop way too short to play during a puzzle that takes over an hour to complete. Picross S Namco Legendary Edition was the final game I completed in 2025. So all in all, I ended up finishing 23 games this year, and I have to say that the thing I love the most about 2025 is that while there were some really great new games, there were a lot of games that felt like throwbacks to the 90s, which is my favorite decade of games. Thank you so much for watching, and let's talk about some of the games you finished down in the comments below. Bye for now.